Welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Our NBA trade deadline special continues tonight, where we actually have trades to discuss. The NBA trade deadline is starting to get a little hotter here, so make sure you guys join us tomorrow night as well to recap the entire deadline. But first and foremost, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Gained 55 subscribers in just the last couple of days. Make sure you guys join us. Follow us over on X at UpsideSN. Appreciate all the support we've gained. So first and foremost, what has happened already? We'll start with the smallest of the trades. Detroit acquires Fontecchio from the Utah Jazz in a swap that includes Kevin Knox and a second-round pick that's going to be higher in the second round than usual anyway. So it's a good quality second-round pick that the Utah Jazz are getting back for relatively a player that they hadn't invested a whole lot in. The Pistons are taking advantage of a player who's played well in the Utah Jazz system, but is still relatively inexperienced at the NBA level. So a little bit of a risk, but they're betting on his potential, having already proven to be a successful player in Utah. Remains to be seen how successful he ultimately becomes, but a good deal here for Detroit. The second trade we saw was the Minnesota Timberwolves finally adding a secondary playmaker, a secondary point guard for them in Monte Morris, who just got back from injury from Detroit. It was a 2-for-1 deal that sends Troy Brown and I can't remember the other name going back the other direction for the Timberwolves anyway, but a second-round pick is also attached to that one. A good veteran point guard that has proven in the playoffs that he can handle the big moments. A good addition here. A little bit surprised that other teams weren't poking around on the possibility of getting in Monte Morris, especially when you consider the money situation that the Timberwolves are in. He was really the only real option that they had, unless they wanted to go with more of an aging point guard like a Patty Mills or something like that. But this was by far the best addition the Timberwolves could have made with their financial constraints. So great job by the Timberwolves getting what they needed here at the deadline. I still don't think they're necessarily done. They have the contract of Kyle Anderson that they can use to bring in somebody else, but he's too big of a fit, I think, for what this team does. A secondary creator, a good playmaker. Think of him as the Draymond Green of this team, maybe a weaker version of that, if you will, when Draymond was, of course, at his prime. But he's still a great ball mover. Can shoot down, or can knock down the three anyway. But it's all about the Eiffel Towers there for the Timberwolves. You got Gobert, going to win this year's the NBA Defensive Player of the Year once again. Towns is an All-Star this year. Kind of controversial as to whether or not he should have gone, or if it should have been Rudy Gobert. Gobert should have gotten it though. But defense doesn't get you into an All-Star game. At least it usually doesn't anyway. But great team for the Timberwolves. The Clippers have actually overtaken them for first in the Western Conference, but it's a four-horse race all the way to the end to ultimately get that number one seed. That final game, that Game 7 on your home court, might be the difference between the Timberwolves advancing past a team like Denver or ultimately getting knocked out in a Game 7. But let us know in the comments section what you guys think of the trades we've already seen. We did have one more trade. Let me get that pulled up for you guys here. Bear with me for just a moment. There we go. The last one is that the Boston Celtics, number one in the Eastern Conference, have made an addition. They sent out Lamar Stevens in the deal to the Memphis Grizzlies. They brought in Xavier Tillman, kind of a good high-energy guy off the bench, somebody with some size. Think of what Grant Williams brought to them for, say, the past 3 or 4 years. He's kind of a simpler version of that. Doesn't necessarily have the scoring prowess that Grant Williams has. Not saying Grant Williams is going to knock the doors off of anybody, but I am saying he is a little bit more accomplished and proven in the NBA, where Xavier Tillman has been struggling to find playing time when the Memphis Grizzlies are healthy. When they are healthy, he does kind of fill that role for what the Celtics are looking for. Energy off the bench, rebounding, some insane playmaking from time to time, and the ability to knock down the odd shot. But Celtics were more looking to round out their rotation, kind of cover up any holes that they might have should they have an injury down the stretch. Say Jaylen Brown gets injured down the stretch. They can put Tillman in the lineup a little bit more to give some physicality to that team that it was missing since Grant Williams left. They still have a great guard rotation now with Drew Holiday. They have Derek White, of course. They have Tatum. They have Brown. They have Kristaps Porzingis. This team looks like a great team, a well-built team up and down. They were very limited financially as to what they could ultimately do. They still have a $6 million player exception, trade exception anyway, that they could use to bring in another piece to the puzzle. So I don't think the Celtics are necessarily done. I think they're going to try to push all their chips to the middle right now to win the championship this year, as they should. This is probably the best team I've ever seen Boston have all the way back until the Kevin Garnett years. Those teams were just a little bit better, but I think top to bottom, this team is probably better 1 through 15, whereas the lineups in, say, 08-09 with KG, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, Rajon Rondo were very top-heavy. Their bench was very thin. James Posey was one of the few pieces off the bench that they had at the time. Eddie House, pieces like that. P.J. Brown, I think it was a buyout guy as well. That was really the only rotation pieces that they had there. And this team, looking at their roster top to bottom, has so many more options on it that they can turn to when they don't have an answer with, say, Tatum or Brown don't have it that night. They can get production from other spots like Holiday, like Porzingis. One of the best teams I've seen the Eastern Conference have since LeBron left that conference. Vida, welcome in. Anything brewing in Utah? There was a rumor before we came on the air. Utah had been discussing a deal with the Toronto Raptors for Bruce Brown. The deal was going to send Kelly Olynyk and Agbaji to the Toronto Raptors in exchange for Bruce Brown. Curious because Olynyk has been rumored to be on the market for maybe a late first-round pick. Bruce Brown for more of a mid-tier first-round pick. And a little curious to see both of these teams communicating with each other that they might do a player-for-player swap as opposed to going ahead and getting that draft capital. But maybe, they're hearing other conversations, more honest conversations from other teams as, hey, if you get the deal done for Bruce Brown and bring in Kelly Olynyk, we will then give you a first-round pick. Maybe that's part of the conversation here around the Raptors, but it sounds like they want to add to the draft capital they got in the deal for Pascal Siakam, and one way of doing that is moving off of Bruce Brown. So we'll see what happens here. Other movement around Utah, to answer your question, they could move one of their guards, looking at Colin Sexton or Jordan Clarkson. They've held on to both of those guys in the past, more specifically Jordan Clarkson, when they had more trade value at certain points in his career with Utah. They're hovering right now around the play-in tournament, but Danny Ainge has made it very clear, if they're not one of the favorites in the Western Conference, he doesn't necessarily want to play for just a play-in spot. So he may ultimately decide to either stand pat or sell, but he's not going to add at the deadline. So let's be very clear as to what Utah's direction is right now. It is not to buy. So that's why the decision to bring in a Bruce Brown is a little bit perplexing. Maybe they view him as a piece for the future. Maybe they view him as somebody they can spin off elsewhere by adding more value to the Kelly Olynyk part of the part of the trade anyway. But we'll see what Utah ultimately does. Now for the biggest teams here to really get into this discussion is the New Orleans Pelicans. Seems like they have touched base with the Atlanta Hawks, and it sounds like things might be getting closer to a deal for the biggest piece that might move here on trade deadline day tomorrow with DeJounte Murray. He is out of the lineup tonight. They're calling it lower back tightness. Let's go ahead and do the air quotes, everybody. Lower back tightness. I'm not buying it. I don't think anybody else in the league is buying it. I think this is purely just to keep him out and possibly have him available for a trade and not suddenly pull a hammy or whatever the case may be in the game tonight. just to make sure he stays healthy. So even if they don't get a deal done, at least they're giving themselves the best chance to get a deal that they would like. Now, as for what could possibly be going the other way, Valanciunas almost would certainly have to be a part of this deal. He may be repackaged elsewhere, but remember, the Atlanta Hawks are looking for draft picks. That's what they're looking to kind of recoup from what they lost in the deal for Murray a few years ago with the San Antonio Spurs. They want to get at least a couple of first-round picks and a player by all accounts. If I'm looking at the New Orleans Pelicans roster, they don't really have the money to be able to keep adding pieces to this team. We saw them just trade off Kira Lewis in that 3-team deal that got Pascal Siakam to the Indiana Pacers. They ended up rerouting Kira Lewis anyway to the Toronto Raptors in that deal to offload his $5.7 million in salary. So keep that in mind with any type of trade that the Pelicans might do here, even if it's a trade that improves their ability on the court. I think money is a very big concern for them. They're a team that's never paid the tax, and I don't think they're about to start now. So they're going to have to include some pieces. Like I said, it's going to start with Valanciunas, and it's going to probably have to include other talent on this roster. You look at who might be of interest. Maybe a Dyson Daniels, a point guard, would be a nice piece going back the other way. Fill the shoes of DeJounte Murray in the lineup anyway for the Hawks. But there's also Trey Murphy who's out there. Now, Trey Murphy on his own probably nets you a first-round pick. So if the Pelicans want to reserve their draft capital as much as they possibly can to get a bigger trade out there wherever it may be coming from, remember, they're still looking for a center as well. There's some rumors as to whether or not Zion Williamson might be the piece that's dangled to bring in a guy like Joel Embiid or another big-time player to this lineup. Brandon Ingram's got some contractual issues going forward, whether or not they bring him back. But this is a team that's got some serious money being spent already. They're going to have to include Valanciunas. And if they include Trey Murphy, that might be worth a first-round pick to the Hawks to be able to get that done. He'd be a great fit in Atlanta as far as I'm concerned. But if they would rather have the draft capital, I know there's multiple teams out there that would be more than willing to include a first-round pick for Trey Murphy. He's been healthy over the last few weeks anyway. Missed some time at the beginning of the year. Otherwise, his value probably is worth more than one first-round pick. But if a team like, say, Dallas, who is also hamstrung by financial constraints, if they can get a part of this deal, maybe they ship out that 2027 first-round pick to Atlanta, maybe even taking on Jonas Valanciunas as another center there, rerouting some money through Dallas, etc. That would be another way this trade could ultimately get done. But it sounds like the Pelicans and Hawks are getting further down the line, at least, with the trade talks for DeJounte Murray than the Los Angeles Lakers have gotten with D'Angelo Russell and DeJounte Murray. So remember, the Hawks want no piece of D'Angelo Russell. It's going to require a third team to take on his deal. Sounds like there's a couple of suitors that might be out there for D'Angelo Russell if that were to happen. But it sounds like the Lakers are also not willing to give up the draft capital necessary to get the deal done either. Sounds like they're willing to trade second-round picks, but they're not willing to include swaps or that 2029 first-round pick, much to the dismay of LeBron James, who is absolutely adamant, much like he is every single year, add is all he wants to see from his front office at the deadline. Last year we saw them go after role players. DeJounte Murray, a little bit better than your basic role player, I would say, but how much of an upgrade is he over what you might have to trade for him? If you have to include Austin Reeves in this deal, I think this is more of a lateral move for them. If they're able to hold on to Reeves, AD, LeBron, kind of go forward with the group that with DeJounte Murray being the fourth piece of that group, then maybe it becomes enticing for them to actually consider the move. The bigger question for them is Pelinka going to be able to stick to his guns and not trade one of those top picks? And if they aren't willing to trade those top picks, they aren't getting DeJounte Murray. They're going to have to settle for smaller pieces, back of the rotation type pieces, maybe some bench players of that ilk, maybe some salary matching that they could do as part of a third team to make the money work for other trades out there to kind of piece it together around the periphery of this roster. Heck, they may even be able to acquire a second-round pick if they ship off the contract of, say, a Gabe Vincent and take on more money. There's all kinds of things the Lakers could do here at the deadline. But first and foremost, what do they have the stomach for? Are they willing to take on the risk that's associated with trading that 2029 first? Are they willing to take the risk of the pick swaps? Or are they going to stick to their guns and just say, nope, you can trade with the pieces that we have on the roster. You can't touch Reeves, LeBron, or AD. You can take any other piece that you want, but other than that, we aren't giving you a cent more than that. So if they do that, the Lakers might be out of the sweepstakes for DeJounte Murray, especially with the New Orleans Pelicans entering the chat. Another team that's supposed to be very active here at the NBA trade deadline is the Dallas Mavericks. Multiple NBA sources are confirming that something is going to happen with the Dallas Mavericks. They're just not sure what. There are some reports out there that say that when the game happened last night with Kyrie's return to Brooklyn anyway, that Dorian Finney-Smith said something to the effect of, "I'm on my way," as in I'm on my way back to Dallas after the game when he was speaking to Jaden Hardy. I didn't necessarily see that in the video that I saw. You couldn't hear the audio of what he actually said. And in fact, if you're trying to read lips, it didn't look like he said quite that. I know there's a lot of false reporting about that being a possibility, but if Dallas is willing to include a first-round pick, I think the Nets absolutely would be willing to do something like that. But they're wanting more than a first-round pick. Supposedly they turned down 2 first-rounders. Maybe they were for that 2024 draft, which the draft picks are valued considerably lower than any other draft. And that 2027 first, along with that 2029 first that the Lakers have, those might be the 2 most valuable draft picks in the NBA right now, and Dallas would be wise to hold on to it until after the season if they wanted to be able to include that pick and 2 others to be able to bring in a star. Remember, they'll still have Tim Hardaway Jr., who will be on an expiring deal. Josh Green's deal will be bumped up because it will no longer be a poison pill. Just those 2 pieces alone probably match as far as salary to be able to get you a star-level player salary-wise, and then those 3 first-rounders. You'd have a very representative offer to be able to bring somebody in. Now, if you're looking for, say, a guy like Joel Embiid, if he demands a trade after the season and they don't get anybody in free agency, then you'd probably have to include a guy like Derek Lively, although I think Dallas would be loath to include him in any deal. He is exactly the type of center that works with Luka Doncic, and I'd be shocked if they moved him. The only player I think they would consider it for is another center if there was nowhere for Lively to play. But we'll see what happens here at the deadline with Dallas. A couple of names that have been linked to Dallas. You're looking more at the 3-and-D, the type wing players. You're looking for more size, power forward type players. P.J. Washington, we spoke about the possibility of a Josh Green for P.J. Washington swap. How that the Charlotte Hornets had identified at least Josh Green as the only player that they've mentioned so far that they were actually interested in acquiring in a deal for P.J. Washington. We thought maybe a 1-for-1 swap would be something that might work for both sides. Maybe a second-round pick on either side to just kind of get this thing all across the finish line. Maybe a contract would have to be included on Dallas' side to make the money work. But as it stands right now, the Charlotte Hornets and Mitch Kupchak, who is basically a lame duck GM right now, sounds like he is going to be the odd man out of that front office by the end of the season. Maybe he's trying to make a big splashy move to make it or to save his job. But the request, or the demand anyway, from the Charlotte Hornets is that not only should Josh Green be involved, but that 2027 first-round pick. I'm sorry, P.J. Washington is a nice, young player, a little bit undersized for a power forward, but does bring some youth and upside for him still to the Dallas Mavericks. But is he the better player in the trade, 1-for-1, Josh Green versus P.J. Washington? I would say right now that's a fairly dead heat between the 2 players. And in fact, I would say Josh Green is showing to be the more ascending player right now. We haven't seen the complete picture of what Josh Green could ultimately look like here in the NBA, but he is blocked in the with the Dallas Mavericks, with Luka and Kyrie blocking him at his natural position at shooting guard, and he's having to come off the bench. Tim Hardaway Jr. is also taking away minutes from him in the lineup. Once they do get bigger size, he would be the odd man out of that rotation, but he's certainly having the best month of his career right now, multiple 20-point games, really showing that he's that 3-and-D type player they had drafted all those years ago ahead of Desmond Bane. We saw the controversy between Bane and Josh Green when Bane came to Dallas and lit the Dallas Mavericks up last season. Basically said, "Josh, who did you draft ahead of me?" He was fantastic. He's earned a max contract with the Memphis Grizzlies since then. But Josh Green has turned into the type of player the Mavericks thought they were getting when they picked him 18th overall a few years ago. And I'm still not sure if he's better or worse than P.J. Washington, but I am saying he certainly isn't that much worse than P.J. Washington, so as to include one of, if not the most valuable first-round pick currently in the game. So that's one of the trade rumors that's out there right now that actually has a lot of legs to it. I still think there will be many different types of trade conversations between Dallas and Charlotte between now and the deadline. Multiple players on the Charlotte Hornets roster would make sense for the Dallas Mavericks to acquire, Miles Bridges among others. Nick Richards would be a good backup center, but his defense is a little lacking. I'm not sure if Dallas would take the risk, especially when they already have Dwight Powell. I'm not sure he would play over Dwight Powell. Another team that's been connected quite a few times with the Dallas Mavericks is the Washington Wizards. Kyle Kuzma has the asking price for the Wizards has been a couple of first-round picks or a first-round pick and a really good player, something along that line. And doesn't sound like Dallas is willing to do that kind of a thing at least right now. But I would have expected the conversation to start to die down a little bit, and it really hasn't. The two teams are still engaged in conversations. Now, they may have moved on from the Kyle Kuzma conversation and moved on to guys like Danny Advida, Advia, I'm sure I'm butchering the name anyway, Daniel Gafford, among others. Maybe they've moved on to that part of the conversation rather than Kyle Kuzma. But Kuzma would certainly represent an offensive upgrade anyway over what they have currently at the 3 or 4 spot. His defense when he was with the Lakers was fantastic as a role player. I'm not sure he's the lead defender in your lineup, but I think when you have other great defenders on the team, he can really buy in and be a good, effective defender as your second, third, fourth best defender. Probably more your third or fourth best defender. They already have something like that though on their roster with Grant Williams. Everybody thought he was going to be the defensive stopper that the Dallas Mavericks needed this offseason. Well, we kind of saw the holes in his game. He looks really great on defense when he's not asked to guard the other team's best player for 30-plus minutes a night. He has since been moved to the bench since then and has started to pick up his play as of late and looks a little bit better. Now, am I saying issues with Grant Williams are resolved? No, but there are still multiple teams involved as far as Grant Williams as well. We look at the discussion that the Milwaukee Bucks had and the Dallas Mavericks, according to Mark Stein, had discussed a Bobby Portis for Grant Williams swap. That ultimately will not happen. Sounds like both sides were not happy with just getting Bobby Portis or just getting Grant Williams. There'd have to be more pieces to it. Maybe a third team would have to be included as well. But we'll see, if the Dallas Mavericks try to offload that contract already. Remember, they did give up a first-round pick swap. Actually, I don't mind the pick swap that the Mavericks made because it's with the San Antonio Spurs. We see what the Spurs are right now. Wembanyama is going to be one of the top 10, top 15 players in the game here in the next year or two. But as of right now, they're still going to be more than likely around where Dallas is going to be at, provided Luka stays in Dallas and re-signs when he's eligible for an extension. So if that happens, that pick swap is basically a nothing type of trade. And what did they get out of it? They got multiple second-round picks. They got off the contract of Reggie Bullock, who really struggled towards the end of last year for Dallas. And then they also added another 3-and-D type defender to their roster. Now, of course, that contract looks a little bit worse than it did at the begin or when it was signed. Everybody thought it was a bit of a bargain. Grant Williams was really happy to come to Dallas, wanted to play with Luka, and he does play to a certain extent well at times, but his shot isn't always there. The defense doesn't always look great because he's being asked to do more than he ever was with the Boston Celtics. And I think Dallas would be wise to recognize that and bring somebody in to play ahead of him. They're asking Derek Jones to do it right now. Great defensive player, but brings almost nothing as far as shot creators, a third ball handler, a third leading scorer for them on offense. But as it stands right now, Grant Williams is on the bench, and they need to bring in a 3 or 4. Welcome in Sub-Zero. Anything on OKC trades? Not as of yet. Honestly, at this point, I'm hearing nothing as far as trades for what they could do. I'm hearing that they could be involved as the third team in a number of different trades using that Bertans contract, much like they've done for the last 10 years, taking on bad contracts from other teams, acquiring draft picks, and moving forward from there. It sounds like one guy who they had interest in, Kelly Olynyk, those talks never really materialized to anything. Another guy that they had interest in is Andre Drummond. Sounds like there's another team out there that's already got 3 second-round picks on the table for Andre Drummond. It may very well be the Oklahoma City Thunder, but according to multiple media reports, it is not them. In fact, the asking price for Andre Drummond right now is a late first-round pick. It sounds like the Chicago Bulls might actually get it. He's a very good a very good rebounder anyway, on a very cheap, affordable contract. Pretty much any team that's going for a playoff spot right now would be able to take on that contract in pretty much any type of a trade. It's just a matter of, are you willing to take, the draft capital and get the deal done? So that's where we're at here at the deadline. We've seen 3 trades so far today, and hopefully we see a couple more here in the next couple of hours. I was looking over a couple different trade ideas. I know Dallas is looking to upgrade their 3 and 4 spot, and there's not a whole lot of options out there. So in light of the Joel Embiid injury, I was kind of piecing together my own type of a trade for what we could see here at the deadline. The Pelicans are said to be interested in DeJounte Murray, and they very well could get that deal done. But if I'm the Atlanta Hawks, I already have Clint Capella on the roster. I have no use for Jonas Valanciunas, so maybe a third team would have to get involved to take on his contract. And if they take on his contract, Valanciunas does have some positive value. You could get another pick for him. I talked at the beginning of the show anyway about a possible three-team deal. DeJounte going to the Pelicans in exchange for Valanciunas, Murphy, and a first-round pick anyway, with the bulk of that return, Murphy and Valanciunas being rerouted to Dallas. Dallas sending a 2027 first-round pick and some contracts out as well to get this deal across the finish line. That would be a fantastic trade, I believe, for Dallas. I know Atlanta, if they really want to get the draft capital back rather than players on the roster, that might be a route that they choose to go. I would rather have a player like Trey Murphy. I would rather have the expiring contract of Valanciunas on my books and try to reroute him in another trade after this deal. Now, you couldn't aggregate him with other salaries to take back a bigger star. So, for instance, say they were still in the market for a guy like Pascal Siakam and they wanted to get this deal done for DeJounte Murray, then package Hunter and Valanciunas to somewhere else. They couldn't do something like that. Valanciunas would have to be traded for another player of very similar salary. You couldn't aggregate it or combine it with another player and get a larger contract back. Now, another trade idea that I was floating around, with a few of my friends that I have in the chat anyway, is that the Dallas Mavericks, they have a very hot and cold, streaky shooter in Tim Hardaway Jr. on their roster. The 76ers absolutely are going to need some offense with Joel Embiid out. I just talked to you guys a little bit about Valanciunas being possibly part of the return for a DeJounte Murray. Say Valanciunas is rerouted to the 76ers. That gives them a starting center, fill in the role of Joel Embiid in this lineup. What would they have to do to get something like that and improve their team while keeping their flexibility after the season and being able to make a run in the postseason once Joel Embiid gets back and healthy? Maybe not to the level he was during this season, but at least giving them a chance to make a run in the postseason. Well, basically it boiled down to Tim Hardaway Jr., Valanciunas, and a couple other pieces going to the 76ers in exchange for Tobias Harris and some other contracts on their books. So if they did something like that, Tobias Harris right now with Embiid out is probably the second banana after Tyrese Maxey. If he's a part of the trade going out, Valanciunas, of course, fits in there in that offense. Similar type of player to Joel Embiid, so you don't have to change your offense a whole lot because Valanciunas brings a lot of the ingredients that Embiid brought to the table, just at a lesser extent. Hardaway Jr., the hot and cold shooter, is one of the best six men in the NBA this year. I think he's fifth or sixth in three-point shooting right now this year, both in attempts for three-pointers and makes for three-pointers. I think that would at least replace some of the offense that they're missing from Joel Embiid. Now, they're going to probably have to play Marcus Morris Sr. anyway a little bit more, and I think he would fit great into the role that Tobias Harris already fills on this offense. They have Nick Batum still there. They have Robert Covington, so they're still covered as far as having some versatile guys at the 3 and 4 spot. But if you're a 76ers fan, would you do something like that to keep your team afloat and make a run at it this season and still have Tim Hardaway Jr. on an expiring deal next year? And if things don't work out, you can obviously flip him somewhere else. But if you don't, you still have plenty of money coming off the books where you can still sign one max free agent, and now you've added a great bench piece to your roster for next season, and all it cost you was the expiring contract pretty much of Tobias Harris. So let us know in the chat if you guys think that would be a reasonable idea for the 76ers to do here at the deadline. Let me go ahead and pull that one up for you guys. Actually, I see a notification. Let me go ahead and pull that up just to see if anything breaking. Nope. Apparently the Mavericks, Locked On broadcast is watching a lot of Hornets basketball over the last couple of weeks. One thing that Nick Angstead of Locked On Mavericks anyway was pointing out today was that we're seeing a lot of out-of-nowhere type of trades. I wouldn't necessarily say Fontecchio was out of nowhere or Tillman. Both have been rumored to be available. But as far as teams that were acquiring them, was a little bit of a surprise. Tillman does fit very well with Boston. Fontecchio does kind of fit the timeline for the Pistons. We knew the teams that were going to be active here at the deadline are continuing to be active here as we much expected. But we'll see, if the Hornets kind of follow suit here and decide to offload P.J. Washington, Miles Bridges. Sounds like there might be multiple second-round picks on the table already from the Phoenix Suns for something to get done there. But let's see if anything else just popped up. Nope. Okay. Let me pull up Fanspo for you guys. We'll go to the trade machine. And let's have a little bit of fun with this one, shall we? Now, we just spoke about what the Dallas Mavericks could do to kind of improve their roster. Remember, they need a 4 on their roster more than anything else right now. So if Dallas wanted to get something done with the 76ers, 76ers want to stop their free fall a little bit here, we'll go ahead and expand this one to a 4-team trade real quick. Let's go ahead and add Atlanta Hawks. Cameron Johnson an option. I'm not sure he would be at this point. I know there's multiple other pieces that the Nets are looking to move here at the deadline. Spencer Dinwiddie, probably first and foremost on that list. Least valuable of the pieces they're trying to move. Royce O'Neal, Dorian Finney-Smith. They would love for somebody to take the contract of Ben Simmons. Then I think they get to the guys that they actually want to keep on their roster, or that they would be willing to give up for an absolute king's ransom. Cameron Johnson would be one of those players. The Hawks were the third team in this type of a trade, and we talked a little bit about the Pelicans for what they would need to do here. Okay. There we go. So the trade here, the point of this deal would be DeJounte Murray ultimately ending up with the Pelicans, so we'll start there. So Pelicans are going to have to trade out probably around $18 million. They have that pretty close there with Valanciunas. We talked about Valanciunas going to the 76ers, so let's start with that one. Tobias Harris would have to go to Dallas. We'll start there. Hardaway would have to go to the 76ers. We'll go there. Okay. So as of right now, just the kind of the basics, bare bones of what this deal would start with, you're looking Tobias Harris essentially for the 76ers going out, Hardaway Jr. and Valanciunas going in. DeJounte Murray going out for the Atlanta Hawks with Valanciunas going out for the Pelicans. Now, Trey Murphy is probably the biggest piece of this deal for the Mavericks, a low-cost, long-term option for them at the 3-4 spot. That would be the reason why they do this. And why are they included? Because they have that 2027 first-round pick. Like I said, one of the 2 most valuable first-round picks left for them to be, for any team to be able to trade at this deadline. Let's go ahead and include that one. And we're going to send it to the Atlanta Hawks. Atlanta ultimately gets that pick. Let's go ahead and throw in a 24 first-rounder, one of the weaker first-round picks there. That one would go to the Atlanta Hawks as well. And they're still going to need some salary coming back. So that's just the draft compensation that Atlanta would get back. So far, for the Pelicans, they're getting DeJounte Murray in exchange for Valanciunas, Murphy, and a first. A very weak first, though. So essentially, they're giving up the value of a really good first in Murphy, a weak first-rounder in the 24 first, and then Valanciunas probably worth multiple second-round picks, maybe a late first as well. That's pretty good value for the Pelicans to be giving up. Is it worth DeJounte Murray? Remains to be seen. Now remember, there is a trade kicker for DeJounte Murray that will be paid for by the Hawks. And remember, the Pelicans are absolutely trying to mind their money right now. They do not want to, go over the tax, go over that threshold. They have never paid the tax, and they do not want to start now. DeJounte Murray would give them another, big piece for them to move forward with on this roster. They would be a little bit light at the center spot. That's the only concern I would have for them. Maybe they move Williamson there. Maybe they play Nance there a little bit more. But that would be the idea of this trade, is to get DeJounte Murray in on that pretty good contract, honestly, and save a little bit of money long-term on that Trey Murphy deal here. Trey Murphy's going to command a significant pay raise in a couple of years. You look at Herb Jones, he's making, the mid-level exception for the next few years. Trey Murphy's probably going to get between 16 to 20 right now, and if he elevates to where he was at the end of last year, before the injury, you're probably looking $20 to $30 million for Trey Murphy. That's not a contract that they could be able to afford and still be able to have a center on this roster or go after one by trading Zion Williamson. So that's part of the reason why the Pelicans decide to make the move now and use the value of Trey Murphy to be able to get a cost-controlled option, another pseudo-star, if you will, in DeJounte Murray. Makes them better both in the short term and the long term for the Pelicans. Now for the 76ers, I told you guys, at the beginning of this, Joel Embiid is going to be out for at least a month. I would expect pretty much until the end of the season. He probably gets back the final week of the year if everything goes right. And then, you probably have 2, really good centers on your roster that at that point. But right now, Valanciunas would at least allow them to keep pace in the tough Eastern Conference. Valanciunas, a very similar type of offensive player to Embiid. Hardaway Jr., of course, would be able to fill some of the scoring void left by Embiid as well. Now, remember, Tobias Harris is another player that scores quite a bit for them right now. Right now, he's on the roster. He's the second banana on this roster. I think Hardaway Jr. and Valanciunas more than make up for the loss of Tobias Harris in this one from an offensive perspective, but they may want one more offensive piece to go there as well. So maybe Dallas includes a guy like Seth Curry, something like that. Maybe Dallas gets a couple of seconds out of it as well. Jalen Smith, an option. The Pacers were rumored to have him available. He's on a $5 million contract for them. I don't think they're going to move him. The only guy the Pacers are looking to move right now is Buddy Hield. They're looking at possibly bringing in Andrew Wiggins or something along those lines. Dorian Finney-Smith could get traded. I mentioned that a little bit earlier in the video, how there's some out there in the media that believe that Dorian Finney-Smith told Jaden Hardy of the Dallas Mavericks after the game they had in Brooklyn the other night that he was on his way. So if you look at the video, you can't hear the audio of what he actually says to Jaden Hardy. Some people are reading his lips and thinking that's what he says, but that's not what it looks like to me. I think they were more talking about dinner plans. Congratulated Luka on being a dad and said he looks like a daddy now. They're really close friends off the court, and so he's really close friends with a lot of the Dallas Mavericks that he was teammates with for the last 6 years. And so there is a natural inclination to believe that maybe Dallas would want to have him back. He's exactly the type of player they need, but as it stands right now, I would hold your horses on something like that. But let's finish this trade off here. Dallas is, of course, going to have to offload more salary. They can't just get rid of Tim Hardaway Jr. and take back $42 million in salary. They're also a team that wants to stay under the tax, so you're probably going to have to offload another $22 to $25 million. So we'll start with looking at Grant Williams and Richaun Holmes. Let's go ahead and send Richaun Holmes to the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks get a $12 million player to kind of take up some of the salary that they're sending out with DeJounte Murray. They're getting a couple of first-round picks, one really valuable, one a little bit weaker. Holmes probably backs up Capella and Okongwu, but I'm not sure that they want to have three centers on this roster making significant money for them. So we'll have to see if when we get this trade done, if there's something else that we can do with that contract. Dallas has played really well with Maxi Kleber, so for now I'm going to try to leave him out of this deal. Let's go back over to the New Orleans Pelicans side of this. With Trey Murphy going, they could use another bigger wing, somebody who can play defense like Trey Murphy was able to, and a guy that would kind of fit that bill who's on a little bit of a depressed value right now would be Grant Williams. So let's go ahead and send him to the Pelicans. But because they're looking very tight against the tax, they're going to have to send back another $9 million. So looking on this roster, what could they give up? Larry Nance is right there. They have Daniels right there. They have Hawkins around values that they could send out. They're probably going to have to include Nance if they decide to do that. But I'm still not sure about that Grant Williams piece. Let's go ahead and take him out. It's just a little rich. Covington's on an expiring deal. That might work. Covington going the other way. But maybe somebody on a cheaper contract would work a little bit better for them. Maybe a Sadiq Bey going back the other direction as well to encourage more draft capital going back to Atlanta. Bey isn't necessarily going to be a long-term piece. He's not a defensive player at all. House can be. Oubre's more of an offensive player. Wes Matthews, a good defensive player, but more of a guard. Not a whole lot there that, I'd be willing to move to the Pelicans. I don't like including more than 2 or 3 teams in a trade. So this framework basically would have to start with the Pelicans and Hawks getting close to a deal already, and then saying, hey, I don't really want Valanciunas. Let's see if we find another team to take him. The team to take him here would be the 76ers, and then the 76ers would need to offload a salary to be able to bring him in to fill in the shoes of Joel Embiid. If they decide to just work with those 3 teams, that might be the best way to get the deal done. That'd be a very interesting move there. Need a low-cost guy, maybe a center-type option. Pelicans have had interest in back-to-back seasons anyway, in both Maxi Kleber and Dwight Powell. Maybe for the cost savings that they would have on Powell, he could be that Larry Nance replacement in the lineup. So let's try that. Let's send Powell to the Pelicans, along with Williams to the Pelicans. Now in this deal, you definitely would have to move off of Nance. Nance would probably have to go to the 76ers. You'd probably have to include Dyson Daniels going to the Hawks, so they get another guard back, increases their value they're getting for DeJounte Murray. Looking at the value of the money, the Hawks could still take, or the Pelicans could still take back around $3 million. So we'll have to see what we want to do with that here at the end. Looking at the 76ers side of the trade, they're basically trading Tobias Harris for 3 rotation players. That's a pretty good deal. Dallas is looking for a backup center, and if they're trading Powell, they would definitely need a center back. Bamba would probably have to go to Dallas. They're 5.1 right now under the tax. That's a pretty good deal. They're getting 2 big-time pieces for what they're looking for here at the deadline. They're giving up the 6-man, or one of the 6-man of the year competitors there in Tim Hardaway Jr. They're going to have to replace his offense in this one a little bit. They do with Tobias Harris. I still think they'd need another shooter in this one. Seth Curry, I think he would fit better on other teams. I just don't think there's enough floor time for him with the roster currently with Kyrie and Luka on it. I think Jaden Hardy probably is the one guy on this roster that probably stays long term if they can get this thing going. I think Josh Green is probably best as a trade candidate next year if things don't work out. So I don't want to include either one of those guys, but Seth Curry could be the guy, you know, if you want to take back another salary here. I know Dallas is looking for a lot of wing help, so maybe a Nick Batum would be great, but Batum's been starting for the 76ers. I don't think they really want to mess with that. One player Dallas has had a lot of interest in is Griffin. Griffin has really lost his rotation spot and lost a lot of faith anyway from that coaching staff of the Atlanta Hawks. So maybe that would be the kind of the long-term youth piece there Dallas could look to acquire. That would fit their timeline. And then let's go ahead and include Seth Curry in this one. Actually, that's pretty close. They stay under the tax. Pels are definitely underneath, or the Hawks are definitely underneath the tax. The only team that's over the tax right now would be the 76ers. And if they could find another team to give them some cost savings, that might work. So one idea that just kind of occurred to me that's looking for some help here at the trade deadline, that doesn't necessarily want to trade a first rounder, but has some second round picks to trade, and absolutely their best player wants them to make a move, is LeBron James. Okay, so I'm going to start this one for the Lakers just to kind of get some draft capital flowing here. Seth Curry goes to the Lakers, gives them another shooter. Say they don't win the lottery here for DeJounte Murray and aren't willing to trade with aren't willing to part with that first round pick. Curry goes to the Lakers. Say Nance ultimately is rerouted to the Lakers as well. Gives them a couple of rotation pieces. Lakers obviously would have to send out a couple of contracts. They don't have a whole lot to trade, but Gabe Vincent would be the guy, you know, on the way out here more than likely. Let's say he goes to... Let's go ahead and say he goes to the 76ers, another bench-type player for them. And then somebody with some size from the Lakers, maybe a Jackson Hayes or a Christian Wood. More offense for the 76ers. That actually would make a lot of sense. Lakers really haven't been valuing him. They're kind of done with him. And 76ers right now, beggars can't be choosers when you're looking for offensive replacements there for Embiid. Kind of like that deal, actually, if I'm the 76ers here. Lakers are 2 and change over the tax. So maybe they include a young guy. Let's go ahead and say they send him to the Hawks. Hawks now get 2 younger point guard, shooting guard types, a couple of first round picks, and now the reason why we included the Lakers in this one. Let me get this back over to them. Is for those picks. Second round pick from the Clippers, going to be one of the worst picks in the draft, but we'll go ahead and throw this one in the deal. We'll send it to the Hawks as well. I don't know why it keeps jumping to the screen. Go ahead and include another second round pick to the Hawks. And another second round pick to the Hawks. Okay. Now let's look at the Lakers' end of this to see if it was worth it for them to be included in this trade or if it's just a waste of time. Alright, so they stay underneath the tax. That's good for them. They save money. Lakers are a family-run business. They're not looking to spend money. In fact, they get paid money if they're underneath the tax by those teams that are over the tax. So that's something they would like to see happen. Good deal for them from the standpoint that all they're giving up off of this roster, Vincent, Wood, and their first-round pick from this past season, a few second-round picks. They do what LeBron wants, and they add here at the deadline. They add a good replacement here for Vanderbilt, who's going to miss what sounds like a few weeks here. Curry gives them some shooting on the outside. Vincent hasn't been a rotation player. They want no piece of Hood. The only part that's costing them is their first-round pick from last year and a few seconds. That's actually a pretty good trade, I would say, here at the deadline for the Lakers. So if I'm the Lakers, I probably like this type of a deal here. So not a bad inclusion so far. In fact, they might even have to include another second-round pick. This is one of the worst second-round picks in the next year's draft. Let's go ahead and throw that one in here. We'll give it to the Pelicans for part of their cost that they're giving up. All right. Let's look at the Pelicans side of things. Is it worth it to them? They get the best player in the trade, DeJounte Murray. The asking price for him is multiple first-round picks. They wanted a couple of first-round picks and a player. So here they get a couple of former first-round picks in Jalen Hood-Schifino. I'm pretty sure I'm mispronouncing that. Dyson Daniels from the Pelicans, in addition to possibly one of the top 2 most valuable first-round picks in the NBA draft over the next few years in that 2027 first from Dallas. They also get a first in 2024. As far as the players on the roster, they don't get a good one here in Richaun Holmes, but they do get some size. They'll be a little bit too big, honestly. In fact, this could facilitate another center move for them, moving on from Clint Capella somewhere. But this would give them at least a player who can be a backup center for them when they do trade Capella. As far as what else do they get in this deal if you're a Pelicans fan, you're losing Valanciunas, you're losing Murphy, you're losing Nance and Daniels. So you're missing 3 rotation players, a good rookie or younger player anyway, and a not-so-great first-round pick. You're getting DeJounte Murray, the best player in the deal. I would say that's a pretty good start. You're getting somebody that's cost-controlled at least, a Trey Murphy replacement in here. You're getting some draft capital back that honestly isn't that far off from the 24 first that you're giving up. Actually, I take that back. That's the 25 first, I believe, from the Clippers. So it is actually a little further off. Dwight Powell is a cost-controlled center, power forward for you guys for the next 3 years, including this year. And the Pelicans are going to need to manage their costs. And so that's kind of the advantage of Williams and Powell in this trade for them. They're not going to be any difference maker for them, but they are going to give them some bench minutes for them. Maybe 10 minutes a game for Powell. Grant Williams probably gives you between 15 and 20. Herb Jones takes a bigger step forward in this offense and in this lineup. Brandon Ingram, now you might have enough money to be able to keep him long term. Zion Williamson, you still have all the pieces as far as trade value with all the draft picks that you have to go out there and acquire another player along with or in exchange for Zion Williamson as well. And so that's sets up the Pelicans pretty well. I like the Pelican side of this. So 2 out of the 5 teams, I really like the return in this deal. Now for the Atlanta Hawks. They're giving up the best player, DeJounte Murray. Things haven't worked out there in Atlanta. We know they've had him on the market, but of course they could always take him back off if they don't get the value that they're hoping for. So what value are they getting for giving up DeJounte Murray? Well, they're getting 2 young players already on the roster. Dyson Daniels, they're getting Hood Schifino. A good return player-wise there. They're taking back the contract of Richaun Holmes to kind of make the money work for this trade. That's a little bit of a negative, but it does give them a backup center if they decide to move Clint Capella here at the deadline as well. The 27 first from Dallas, like I said, one of the most valuable first-round picks available here at the deadline. A weaker first-round pick and another second and another second. So they are getting some pretty good draft equity. 3 second-round picks from the Lakers here. Couple of first-round picks and a couple of young guys. That's about as good of a trade that the Hawks could probably hope for. Honestly, the Lakers could probably take back one of those seconds, and it would still be a good deal for the Hawks and the Lakers. So I like this one for the Hawks. I'm not saying I'm in love with it. A.J. Griffin was a former first-round pick, looked really good last year, and for whatever reason, the numbers are just way down. His minutes are way down this year, and there's been opportunity for them to be able to use him, and they just have chosen not to. For whatever reason, maybe he's not shooting the ball well in practice. Maybe he just doesn't jive with the coaching staff there. Whatever the case may be, a change of scenery looks like what might work best for A.J. Griffin. Dallas is looking for a young guy, 6'5" type of player. Has always seemed to be the type of player they like to target. So, Dallas has already been a team that's expressed interest in him. Part of the reason why Dallas makes this move, gives up their 6th man of the year in Tim Hardaway Jr. Not only do they get the scoring ability of Tobias Harris, but they also get the long-term ability of a Griffin and a Murphy here. But I do like this trade overall for the Hawks. Now for the 76ers, the biggest impetus for this trade for them is being able to replace the offense and the overall ability to win games that Joel Embiid brought to them. Valanciunas, kind of a poor man's version of Joel Embiid, slides comfortably into that Embiid role. They have Tim Hardaway Jr., who's going to probably come off the bench for them. We'll see if they decide to put Melton in that starting lineup or if they keep Batum in there, whatever they decide to do. But they're offloading a expiring contract in Tobias Harris that does have value here. But they are getting some offense back here with Wood, Hardaway Jr., and Valanciunas. Gabe Vincent, a good guard for them for their guard rotation. They already have Pat Beverly there, but Vincent would be another good piece for them to kind of get some more scoring on that roster, to kind of at least tread water until Embiid does come back. And I think this actually helps out that supporting cast quite a bit. Now they may have to ultimately trade some other pieces off the back end of this deal to save them some more money off the tax. The Hawks, for instance, could take back some money here, just to make this thing work. Let's look at the back end of this roster real quick for the 76ers here. Korkmaz is on an expiring deal. I'm not sure there's much room for him on the roster if this trade goes through. Pelicans could use somebody like him, his shot-making ability. There's been rumors about House being available for a considerable length of time now. Let's go ahead and throw him to the Hawks. Expiring deal. And there you go. 76ers save another $4 million off of their cap sheet and another $6 million in tax or so. Not a bad deal there by including him. And they still get what they want out of this deal. Now, if you're a 76ers fan, you guys tell me, is this enough for you guys to stay in contention in the Eastern Conference, bringing in Valanciunas, Hardaway, Wood, and Vincent, some offensive pieces to replace the offense you're losing in Joel Embiid's injury, and in the offense you're losing in Tobias Harris? Outside of that, it's not really costing you anything. Honestly, you could probably throw in a second-round pick just to make this deal work if somebody needed a second-round pick to finish this deal off. But in general, I think this deal looks pretty good if you're a 76ers fan. It's costing you about a $1.1 million more in salary than you were before the trade, but it does improve your overall team, I believe, bringing in, relatively the same amount of scoring with Harris and Hardaway, and you replace some of the offense that Embiid brought to you with Valanciunas and Wood. So I like that deal for the 76ers. Now, as you guys know, I am a little bit of a Dallas Mavericks fan, so keep that in mind when you look at this trade here for them. Now, Dallas wants to stay under the tax, so we look at that first and foremost. They are under the tax. In fact, they could probably take back $4 million or so in a salary dump as well. So, for instance, if the Hawks didn't want House, they could easily float it onto Dallas. Dallas could take it and waive him if they wanted to. In fact, let's go ahead and do that first, because the Hawks have no interest in, I believe, in Daniel House. There you go. Dallas is still underneath the tax here. They're taking back $52 million. They're sending out $50 million. Money works for them. Now, as far as what they're getting on the court, biggest piece for them right now, I would say, is Trey Murphy, cost controlled for one more year, and Tobias Harris is on an expiring deal. The best part for them is this gets them kind of their free agent shopping done right now, because I think Tobias Harris, if he gets to Dallas, would be a great fit next to Luka and Kyrie. Exactly the type of player that they're looking for. And Tobias Harris has been asked to guard, the lead person on the other sideline as well for a few years now. Ever since Ben Simmons has left, he's been the guy that's drawn that defensive assignment. Now that Nick Batum is there, he's drawing that assignment to take some of the load off of Tobias Harris, but he's capable of doing that. Would you like to have a better player overall there as the third banana there in Dallas? Absolutely, but Tobias Harris is still a fantastic player, and he probably will remain a fantastic player for another year, maybe two. But he's no longer what we thought he would be as far as the value of a max contract at one point in his career. You look at the rest of this deal, they saved some money on Dwight Powell, Grant Williams, Rashawn Holmes. Those are the contracts that they're sending out. Powell, cost-controlled contract for the Pelicans. That's why they want him. Same thing for Grant Williams, whereas Murphy, if he's able to get back to where he was last year before the injury, he's definitely going to command north of $20 million, and they aren't going to be able to afford that. So that's part of the reason why they capitalize on his value now, and it doesn't cost him all the draft picks to be able to bring in DeJounte Murray. Bamba here for Dallas gives them a good backup center option behind Derek Lively Jr. and Maxi Kleber. Bamba probably would end up playing, the Dwight Powell role on this team, 8 minutes a night, something like that, kind of the third center, if you will, much like he does in Philadelphia. One player for the future there, AJ Green, buy low candidate for them, probably worth a few second-round picks at this point, maybe a couple of second-round picks. But Dallas basically gets him to kind of finish sweetening this deal for them and for the Hawks to kind of increase their return draft pick-wise as well. Dallas offloads the contract of Seth Curry, gives them the Lakers a veteran shooter. One of the most valuable first-round picks once again. Dallas Mavericks sending that to the Hawks to help the DeJounte Murray side of the deal. Tim Hardaway Jr. is the biggest loss for this offense. Their third leading scorer. He's been fantastic for them. He's probably in the discussion, probably 1, 2, or 3, depending on how you shake it out, as one of the favorites to win the Sixth Man of the Year award. If he was more consistent, I would say he's far and away the favorite to win that award, but he's just a little bit streaky, and that's why Dallas, who already has two great guards on their roster, they already have Josh Green, they already have Jaden Hardy, they free up some minutes for those guys by offloading Green, and they get a little bit more size in this deal. That's the biggest thing Dallas wants to do here at the deadline is add size, and they do that in spades with Harris and Murphy. So I like the deal for all 5 teams. I'm not saying I like it more or less for other teams. For instance, Dallas, I think, is still getting a pretty good deal here. I think Dallas could probably include a couple of second-round picks to get this one across the finish line if they had to. But in general, I really like this deal for them. Dallas is essentially getting Tobias Harris. If things don't work, they let him walk in free agency. Trey Murphy, they'll have him for a year and a half. Bamba could walk in free agency. Griffin's on is on the outs anyway with the Atlanta Hawks. Maybe they can resurrect some of his value that they saw last year. And House is just salary filler at this point for the 76ers to save a little bit off of their tax bill. So they take him back since they have the open roster spot. I would expect them to waive him and possibly bring in a guy like Tony Snell. If you guys are curious as to why I mentioned his name, check out our video that we posted last night as to why Tony Snell's name should be in the front of your mind. Charles Barkley made a great, had a great little segment there on TNT the other night about why that man needs to be signed to a team and finish the season with the team in order to get medical care for his children. So we'll see what happens here at the deadline, but let's go ahead and submit this trade and just see what happens. Try this trade. we have success. Mavericks ultimately add 2.3 million. 76ers save a little bit. Hawks save a little bit. Pelicans save a little bit. And the Lakers save a little bit. So the only team adding salary is the Mavericks. As far as picks, the Hawks, of course, add a net of 5 picks and a couple of young players, recent draft picks in the first round. Pelicans get the best player in the deal. Lakers add a couple of role players without having to give up a first-round pick. 76ers replace the production that Embiid gave them, and they get some flexibility going into the offseason as well. They'll still have enough room to be able to make a max contract offer to somebody out there, or be able to take in a max contract via trade if they decide to go that route as well. Maxey's going to be deserving of a max contract this offseason, so things are kind of in flux anyway for the 76ers. They need to try to win. They can't afford to give up on 1 year of Joel Embiid. This was supposed to be the year Embiid was going to be healthy for the postseason, and they were supposed to make a big-time run and see what they really could do at the deadline here and into the postseason. Embiid is injured, unfortunately. That's not going to happen, so they have to be able to tread water until they get Embiid back. If they are able to get him back before the end of the season, that's kind of the best case scenario right now for the 76ers. But if they don't, they at least get Embiid light in Valanciunas. They get some of the scoring in Tim Hardaway Jr. and Christian Wood, and Gabe Vincent also gives them a little bit of three-point shooting off the bench. So overall, like the deal for all 4 of those teams, and of course, you know my hometown Dallas Mavericks. I love those. I love the return for them. Trey Murphy, the biggest return of this deal for them. That's why they're willing to give up that first-round pick in 2027. Otherwise, if there wasn't a Trey Murphy in this deal, I don't think there's any way that 27 first-rounder is moving in this deal. If it was just Tobias Harris that they were getting back and a couple other pieces, I think they would just move on from Hardaway, Williams, etc. would all be fine, but they would be very reluctant to give up that 27 first, because giving up that 27 first means that decreases their ability to make a biggest trade offer that they can after the season, including 3 first-round picks for the star of their choice. They will be right there with a whole bunch of other teams with a lot more picks to be able to trade after the season, and if they don't have that 27 first, they're really only going to have 2 picks that they could move, the 25 first and the 31 first, and that's just not enough, especially when you consider, a team like the 76ers currently has 3 first-round picks that they could trade. They'll have 5 first-round picks that they could trade after the season. Multiple teams out there are stockpiling picks. 11 teams account for 75% of the tradable picks at this year's NBA trade deadline. That's why that Dallas pick in 27 is so valuable. That'll be after Luka Doncic's deal currently expires. If Luka decides, I don't want to be in Dallas, I want to trade, or if Luka says, I just want to leave in free agency, the Mavericks obviously would be a much worse team if Luka decided to leave, and that's when that 27 first-round pick becomes so much more valuable. Same thing with the LA Lakers. That's why they don't want to get rid of that 29 pick, because obviously LeBron isn't going to be playing for another 5 years in a Lakers uniform. They're going to be going through a period of adjustment. Remember, the Lakers were a dumpster fire before LeBron got there. There was really no reason for LeBron to go there other than for business reasons. Get his businesses out to Los Angeles and see if he could grow his brand out there. He brought a title to the Lakers, and he brought AD to the Lakers, and that team looks like a much brighter future anyway than they would have had if LeBron had not have come there. But then you look at what the Lakers currently have as far as draft assets, and it's not much. That's why Pelinka is very loath to include a first rounder for a guy like DeJounte Murray, who may or may not improve this team. If they were to bring in DeJounte Murray, I think Atlanta would be adamant about them getting a 29 first-round pick unprotected, and possibly Austin Reeves. They want no part of D'Angelo Russell as well. And I just don't think the Lakers can stomach that type of a deal, especially if it costs them Austin Reeves. Now, the pick might be a little bit more palatable, but Pelinka has made it very clear he does not want to give up any more draft capital via swaps or that first rounder. That's why I think they're going to go more of the role player route like they did last year, and so that's what they get here. Lakers would get a three-point shooter in Seth Curry. They would offload the contract of Christian Wood, essentially, who doesn't really fit on this roster and has made a few comments as such to the media. And they also get a good high-energy player to replace Vanderbilt in the lineup, at least until he's healthy. And then once Vanderbilt is healthy, they would still have both of those guys who play very similarly on the court at any given time next to AD. I think that would be fantastic for them to have. So there's our 5-team trade. We'll go ahead and post this one on Fanspo. You guys can vote on it here shortly. thank you guys for joining us tonight. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. We'll be live for you guys tomorrow, breaking down all the latest from the NBA trade deadline. Be sure to join us later on this evening for MLB Hot Stove Daily as well, as we do that one every single weekday leading up to spring training. Super Bowl is this weekend, so make sure you guys check out all the Super Bowl content that we've been posting over the last couple weeks. Actually had our most viewed video post yesterday, and it's more than doubled the views on all of our other videos that we've ever had on this channel. Really want to thank you guys for all the support that you've given us. Like I said, we've gained 55 new subscribers in the last week or so. It's been fantastic. Thank you guys so much. We finally crossed that 1,600 subscriber threshold anyway, and we'll see if we can keep on climbing. Hopefully here in the next couple of months we can reach that 2,000 mark. So thank you guys, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow night.